Greetings, Kindred, and welcome back to my world of darkness, where today we're doing episode 11 of the Thicker Than Water recap. And we are still in Project Ragnarok because this is the plot line that doesn't end. No, we've actually gone from it's an interesting chain of events. Really, everything started off because of the storyline that took place in the Sticks and Bones plot line that is outlined out in the Cults of the Blood Gods supplement for Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition. And we have played on through to what the consequences would be. For instance, what would the mortal authorities be doing? Currently, they'd still be looking for a serial killer. Last episode, you guys saw that the serial killer drama, however, was done with the sad destruction of our dear friend Damien Hargrave, who, although lived, he is now known to be dead and has to find a way to take on a new identity. Luckily, he does have Sam, who is a master of masks and knows how to build identities out of nothing, or even better, how to find identities of people who are not using them anymore and to reshape them. That way he can get a hold of birth certificates, social security cards, and all those wonderful, wonderful things. So that being the case, last episode we left off with Damien crashing onto the floor in the Pittock mansion, and everyone being greatly relieved that the young Lasombra was still alive. Now, at this point in time, we are going to continue that night for a very short amount of time because it is about 1 a.m. in the story, and there are some things that need to be taken care of. The new identity for Damien is not something that can be put off, and due to the fact that it will take several hours to get him to be exactly where they want him to be physically, this is also a lesson for Sam on how to use flesh crafting to his advantage to help him with his masks. So it is decided that both Damien and Sam are going to receive new looks. So out of character, just to let you guys know that there will be an avatar change for both of those characters and an identity swap. So after this episode, we might be knowing them as two different names. I cannot promise you that I'm not going to screw that up from time to time, because as it is, I call some of these players by their characters' names, and it's not on purpose. But as things are coming together and Maquette and Sam begin to get everything ready to work on Damien, Dawn excuses herself to check on something in her room. The remaining Kindred all head down into the caves underneath the Pittock mansion because Vassell does not want any use of flesh crafting or vicissitude or any perversion of Protean in his home, but he will allow it inside the caves beneath, inside the sacrilegious cave anyway, inside the ritual chamber anyway. So they do set stuff up, and over time, with Sam learning exactly how the muscles fit together, and basically a Zamitzi anatomy lesson from one to the other, it goes over quite well, and our dear Damien has now switched to Axel Louis Armstrong. It not being a complete and total change around like Damien's was into Axel, I'm going to point that out there, Damien into Axel, Sam decides that he's going to go ahead and work on himself for a little while. Maquette does help a little bit, but this is something that Sam himself has to do. He's masking himself for a change. Tinia is not okay with any of this. This is a stomach turning thing that she's just not ready to deal with. So she ends up going back up into the actual Pittock mansion in the middle of Damien's / Axel's surgery. And then Tommy is born, which is Sam's new persona. So that is how we finish that night. The first couple of moments of game were based explaining what exactly is going on, how uncomfortable Tinia was, the surgeries between Damien / Axel and Sam / Tommy, and the fact that Dawn excused herself and was not seen for the rest of the evening. Now, when we next meet the Kindred, we have all of our Kindred in the Piddock Mansion. This is their 4th night there. They are not meant to be there. The Kindred are all waking up rather hungry after the activities from the night before. Our new Tommy, Sam, and Axel, Damien, meet up with Tinia and Deacon, who arrived last night during the surgery to see his child being changed from one person to the other and accepting that it was something that needed to be done. They all meet down in the hall, in the feasting hall for breakfast, as Ivan Vassell has invited them down to breakfast each time. But when they wake up this time, there's no note on their door inviting them down to sup with him this evening. There's no cordial, the mints on the pillow are gone. So they do make their way down, and when they get down there, they find Ivan Vassell and his child Toulouse and the new hostage Maquette, who are all sitting around. The servants, in fact, do give them goblets of blood as they sit down, at a nod from Toulouse. But they will notice as they're sitting there that Dawn has not come down. She hasn't shown herself. Ivan Vassell is also not in the chatty mood that he typically is in. He seems darker. He seems less human tonight. He's quiet and withdrawn. The light seems to want to avoid his very presence, and instead of a silver goblet filled with blood, which he usually drinks out of, he's feeding directly from his retainers, and not politely. He's not sipping. He's not taking a small amount with a little pinprick of his fangs. He's digging into their wrists, and they are in pain until they collapse on the floor out of exhaustion and agony, and then another is brought to him until he is completely satiated. At this point, the Kindred realize they have overstepped their welcome. They are not meant to be there anymore. And as they go about their planning on leaving and on exactly what they should be doing, Vassell gets up and leaves unannounced. Toulouse explains to them that they are no longer safe, and if they wish to have his continued support, they might want to apologize for outstaying their welcome, possibly presenting another gift if possible, and also leaving as soon as possible. As soon as vampirically possible. Toulouse follows him out of the room fairly quickly. It's a very interesting situation where the Kindred at that point start to go in order from Deacon down to Axel, Damien, Tinia, and then our new Tommy, who was Sam, then get up one at a time and follow him out onto the veranda where he's just staring off into the night sky. Now, when they get out there, there's no sign of Toulouse. However, there is a very large wolf standing at the right side of Ivan Vassell, and when it turns to look at the oncoming Kindred, it has very prominent glowing red eyes. But then it turns its attention back to the distance where they're looking. And one by one, each of the Kindred realize that they are being watched. About a quarter of a mile off, above the city, flying in the air, are 7 individuals. 7 people flying in the sky. One of them quite obviously has fire in his hands, the other one producing some other kind of bluish white light. And it is that time they realize that the Tremere that Billy Smith had promised to bring into the city are now here, and they are earning their place. They're keeping an eye on the Piddick Mansion. So one by one, the Kindred apologize to Ivan Vassell, who doesn't seem to give them a moment's notice. He just wants them out at this point. Now, back inside the house after the apologies are given and Ivan Vassell stays out on the veranda, the Kindred all gather around as Tinia and Maquette are having a conversation. Her primarily wondering what exactly he did to her the night before, removing the threat of frenzy that she was about to face. And he explained to her that it was just a level of animalism and that it was something that he picked up because he does interact with a lot of ex-Sabbat, and being able to remove their ability to frenzy from time to time is just a level of safety. And also his job collecting what he calls the Fargons, those individuals that he was collecting in the shipping tankers. Sometimes that helps out with them too, but not 100% of the time. Tinia seems very interested in this, and I think that might actually be something that she ends up aspiring to later on, is being able to have a full control over her beast. And hopefully, perhaps, one night, she'll be able to get to that point, even though she's a Bruja. But when everybody else gets back inside, that is also when Maquette lets them know that his sire has taken an interest in what exactly is going on in the city, because they happen to have a mutual friend in Crescenza Grimaldi, and he has been informing him exactly what's going on concerning the Romanian Legacy Foundation. Given the fact that Maquette's sire Marcus is one of the remaining members of the Kravetsky Revenant family, which years ago had a falling out with Clan Zamitzi, you might say. But Marcus was embraced before that happened. Now, at this point, our characters take the mirror that they use to walk from the Piddick Mansion to the busted out motel. They've taken that down into the ritual chamber beneath the mansion in the caves. And as they attempt to walk through it, Deacon realizes that it's just a cold piece of polished obsidian at this point. However, Damien / Axel decides that he's going to give something a little bit of a chance, since he has noticed that in the writings, in the lore that he's been able to find on Shalim, that it accepts blood sacrifices of its kind. He bites a little piece of his thumb and then smears some blood on the mirror, which instantly springs it to life. And at that point, the Kindred take that little jaunt, nearing the abyss from one point to the other to get back to the motel. Arriving back at the motel, they come face to face with Colin, who's sitting in the office area, and they spend some time catching him up on what exactly is going on. That Damien and Sam are now Axel and Tommy, and that Damien also survived the events from last night. Colin, at that point, explains to them that the kickoff for the Romanian Legacy Foundation will be happening the next night, and that Deacon Royce's church has also successfully relocated into the Benson Hotel as well. And with that information, our coterie goes about planning exactly what they are going to do the next night. Now, first, they send Harker to a 24-hour print shop to make up 3,000 posters of Billy Smith versus Old Jake the Elder, which is a gangrel elder rumored to live in the wilderness of Oregon. Now, Old Jake has his history in Portland, but he has not been seen in years, at least since the gangrel left the Camarilla. So this seems to be more of an idle threat. But the fact that they're hanging pictures of the current prince fighting at the Benson Hotel on the floor that the Elysium is in might make the Camarilla scramble to try to get as many of those posters down as possible, because they paste them up all over the city during the day using ghouls. Now, during the planning session, Colin also lets slip that Cert is actually looking for a young lady of Tinia's description. Not only that, they also have her car. This is coming about due to the fact that a few nights ago, Tinia was pulled over during the martial law, and Damien, the three-faced killer, came out and saved her as she ran off out away from the police. This conversation comes up, but Damien is completely confused. He has no idea what anybody's talking about, and he says that he did not rescue her in any way. And this is going to be a very big point of confusion, as Tinia is now confused that she had been rescued by somebody who claims didn't do it. But throughout all the confusion, the plans are set. During the day, ghouls are going to run around pasting up these posters. As soon as the sun sets, the Camarilla are going to be, hopefully, running around like mad, trying to get all the posters with their prints fighting some elder in the hotel, on the floor of the Elysium, mind you, off of the streets as much as possible. A letter is going to be delivered to the hotel lobby to one Elena Zantoza, who is on the guest list, by the way, for the Romanian Legacy Foundation. And in that letter, it will be explaining to her that Anton Dracon is, in fact, the lost revenant, Kenneth Obertus, and he is still holding his residence at the XTC Gentlemen's Club, which used to be her saloon. The church will be in place, and then the idea that our new Axel is going to be walking directly into the Elysium, introducing himself to the prince as Deacon's other child, and will be attempting to participate in the blood hunt to gain entry as a resident of Portland, Oregon, with enough time for him to keep the Camarilla busy while this plan is insane. Tinia, Tommy, Sam, and Colin travel through the underground Shanghai tunnels to the Benson Hotel to break in, cut the power, and when the power goes out, Axel is to try to get his hands on Merrick and shadow step to safety. So as all this stuff is going on, if things go a little bit longer, they will actually have Axel leave the Benson Hotel and get a falsely staked Deacon and bring him back up as extra protection and as also a way to pass the time. Another thought process for that whole thing was it might be a good idea for when the power goes out to keep Axel in the good standings of Billy Smith and the Camarilla, to have Deacon shadow step away, physically assaulting Axel on his way out to maintain his innocence in this whole thing. And then just as the sun is coming up, whenever they put Merrick wherever they're going to put him, Deacon will come back out, grab Merrick, and leave without any of the Kindred knowing, giving them an entire day's worth of time to rest and regroup before the Camarilla even knows what's going on. And I am thrilled with this plan. However, it really is not the plan, but the execution that matters. The next night, things start to get a little rocky. First, the mercenary friend of Damien, Axel, delivers Alicia. And so they now have this torpid Bruja to deal with as well. When they decide that they need to make sure that everybody is full, Damien takes one of the cars that the Anarchs have gotten a hold of during this entire thing. He goes out and he finds some prostitutes. Unfortunately, things go a little sour as he brings them back, and they realize that this is not really a place where they want to do business. He ends up paying them an exorbitant amount, and as they step out, Tommy, I'm gotta get used to this whole Tommy Sam thing. Tommy takes one of them who introduces herself as Chastity and goes off into a room just as Tinia realizes what exactly Axel is doing. And unfortunately, Tinia has an issue with who she considers women in distress. And seeing these women who are obviously being taken advantage of by this Kindred, Tinia does not handle that very well, and she goes over and starts harassing Axel, which leads to her getting the girls out of there and off to the side. And as soon as all that is all cleared up, Chastity comes out of the room looking better than Tommy. Tommy feels as if he's been drugged. He's having a very interesting sensation, hallucinations, and the like. And as they walk off, Chastity collects the money from the other two as they walk into the distance, leaving Tinia confused. Tommy drugged severely, and Axel still hungry. You would hope that this is as bad as things are gonna go, but unfortunately things actually just go completely worse when they actually arrive at the Benson Hotel. When Axel pulls up with Deacon in the car, in the parking lot at the Benson, they can see the lobby completely full. Deacon stays in the car as Axel goes inside. When Axel walks inside the Benson, and amongst the throng of people, he sees two signs. One telling him the floor that the Romanian Legacy Foundation will be hosting their meeting on, and the other a sign that says that the First Presbyterian Church of Portland will be meeting in Conference Room B. As Axel makes his way through the people, he decides that he's going to try to make himself noticeable to the Kindred. He's going to ask questions that could gain him access to the Elysium, because he doesn't want to walk into the area supposedly as a new person, just all of a sudden knowing everything. So as he weaves his way to the front desk, however, he feels a hand on his shoulder and a whisper in his ear, asking the very sing-song voice if they can help him find anyone. And when he turns, he comes face to face with Anna Roma. They go through the introductions, and then as Anna Roma starts to lead him over towards the elevator, she places her hand on a young boy who's sitting in a chair, sketching his shoulder, and says, "Keep an eye on the front. I'll be back in a few minutes." And then Axel and Anna are alone in an elevator for a couple of minutes. While this is happening, the rest of our coterie, consisting of Tinia, Tommy, and Colin, make their way to one of the entrances that Tinia knows about to get into the Shanghai tunnels. It's not too far from the Benson Hotel, but it's also not close enough to possibly gain suspicion or gain alarm. As Tinia is about to break open the entryway to get in because she has found it padlocked, Tommy does notice that it is in fact alarmed, and he is able to bypass the alarm to be able to get them to open it without actually setting anything off. Tinia rips open the entrance, and they're able to gain entry fairly easily, shutting the door behind her and making their way through the tunnels. Now, unfortunately, Tinia has not realized that they have taken more precautions in this, and no one passes their awareness checks. And a very large steel door falls and lands flat on Tommy's foot. This could have been a lot worse. This could have actually killed Tommy, but he just barely got out of the way in time. And now our Kindred are separated by a thick sheet of metal. Now upstairs, Axel is weaving his way through the group of Kindred on the 6th floor, being able to see Merrick lightly swaying in the breeze of the air conditioning behind the throne that Billy Smith has set up. Now, interesting enough, Anton Dracon's not here. Rose is. His wife is. Mercy is, which is actually something strange. Most people don't see Mercy without Anton being nearby. but perhaps she's just being used as protection for Rose this evening. Now, everything seems to be going off without a hitch. Billy is polite and welcoming and showboaty about how wonderful the town is. And Axel goes on about why those are the reasons why he wishes to be here. And the conversation gets to why exactly anybody would betray their sire, and it just goes on and on as pleasantries and conversation as all the Camarilla Kindred within Portland lean in to listen to what this new La Sombra has to say. Downstairs, on the other hand, unfortunately, we are going through some issues due to the fact that Tommy is not doing well at all. He's still hallucinating very bad. He's under the effects of whatever drugs Chastity had in her system, and using all of the potence that he can summon, he reaches down, slips his finger underneath the metal barrier, and forces it up as hard as he can. And as the rest of the coterie comes into view, everyone hears a loud crash as the metal partition rips through the asphalt into the street above, and a car slams into it. This also causes a massive cave-in, bricks, rubble collapsing in, but luckily the entire coterie is all on the same side at this point. They continue on to find the entrance into the Benson completely blocked off by a cell door. And on the other side of that cell door, we see Rhino, a kindred that no one has ever met before, and 4 Nosferatu. The new kindred is snide and has a lot of remarks to give. And as he's giving suggestions such as, maybe you should just come with us, and things like that, Tommy decides that he's going to throw a fucking Molotov cocktail. Can I please express my hatred of the Molotov cocktail? You never get a solution with a Molotov cocktail. You just have more problems at that point. Maybe it's a different problem, but it's still a problem. And as the bottle clears in between the bars and hits on the ground, the 4 Nosferatu and the unknown kindred all erupt into flame, with Rhino being quick enough to move to the other side of the room to avoid it. The throwing of the Molotov, however, also sends our kindred on the other side into a bit of a fear frenzy, because the fire gets out of control, as now Tommy, who threw the bottle, and Colin run towards the cave-in, Tinia being stuck to deal with figuring out what the next move is going to be. Rhino is jumping quick into action, putting out the fire, first using his coat, then moving on to a fire extinguisher he found in the basement. Unfortunately, with all this going on, the fire alarm goes off, and the power gets messed up in the hotel, which makes Axel believe that this is the time to act. And as all the lights go off and the security regimen huddle around the prince, which unfortunately is also huddling around where Merrick is dangling, our dear Axel shadow steps into the closest dark puddle and comes out with enough time to grab a hold of Merrick's leg and force back into the Shadowlands. Unfortunately, he is at that point having a hard time finding any shadows that fully connect to anywhere outside. And during the commotion, someone opens the door and lets him out willingly. And with all the commotion of the kindred on one side of the door, Axel, with a staked Merrick, comes out of a shadow on the other end, seeing that Rose Dracon, the wife of Anton, let them out, and tells them to run, get out of here, and get Merrick to safety, leading Axel and Merrick to take a fire escape, where Axel then removes the stake and very luckily does not have to deal with a frenzying Ventrue. Meanwhile, down below the streets, things are just getting worse and worse as Colin is able to snap out of the frenzy once he's out of fire, and he's able to grab onto Tommy and force him out of frenzy as well. But just as things are starting to loosen up on that, the unknown Kindred, who is now revealed to be a Tremere, releases a Levin bolt from his hands and strikes Tinia in the back as she's going to check on the other Kindred. As she's recovering and picking herself up off the ground, he activates Theft of Vitae, because in my game, we allow Theft of Vitae to be used on vampires because it's called Theft of Vitae, not Theft of Blood. So Tinia feels her arteries opening and her blood being wrenched out and forcing itself to the Tremere, who is now using her to heal. And with a snide remark says, if I take enough of your blood, you'll end up frenzying on your friends anyway, and you'll take care of yourselves. As Tommy comes to his senses with everything that's going on, he runs over and throws yet another Molotov cocktail. This time, the water on the floor carrying the alcohol and the fire out into the hall, where the Kindred are trying to avoid being attacked by the Tremere again. So, Rhino has not been injured at all. The Nosferatu and the Tremere have, and they're huddling in a corner trying to stay away. And they're frantically trying to get a hold of Axel to try to let them know exactly what is going on below the streets. After removing the stake from Merrick, the older Ventru, he suggests that they go up instead of down. If they go down, they're going into the lobby. If this Kindred, who just rescued Merrick, can in fact jump through shadows, and Axel does introduce himself as Damien, he does let him know exactly what's going on, then they should be able to get from the shadows on the roof to the shadows on the street. But when they get down there, they see the horrible commotion that's going on as emergency vehicles as they're trying to remove this metal slab off of a car, and people are afraid that there's going to be an explosion. The fire alarm is going off inside the Benson. The residents of the Benson are flooding the streets. There's just people everywhere, and this is not a good way to protect the masquerade and get anyone out safely. But the confusion of this might actually work to their advantage, and they are able to shadow step from the roof down into an alley across the street right next to the car where Deacon is sitting in wait. And as Merrick collapses into the car, there's a knock on the window, and Elena Zantoza stares down at him, looks over to Deacon, and says, "That boy has sure grown." Because she was in town when Merrick was embraced. She knows exactly who James Merrick is and exactly what importance he is to the city. Deciding that more trouble is really what they need to be able to escape. More trouble for the Camarilla, obviously, but not to them. They explain that the Elysium to the Camarilla is up in that hotel. And Elena gets a sly smile on her face as she calls over a couple of the other leaders of the Romanian Legacy Foundation and explains to them exactly what's going on, and the idea of possibly sending hellhounds in might be a fun thing to do. And a good laugh is had by everybody. Now, with all the commotion that's going on, Deacon decides that they need to get Merrick healed and they need to get him out of here. And he dominates a human to get into the car and tells Merrick to feed. And he says that he can't, obviously, because he's a Ventru and he has specific feeding needs, and explains that he needs someone who has been drinking whiskey quite heavily if he's going to survive this. I should cover Merrick's history at some point, maybe in one of those webcomic things that I did before, just because it is a very interesting story in my opinion. I very much love my NPCs. But they are able to get to a liquor store. Deacon enters the store, buys some whiskey, and then forces his young captive to drink. And after a few moments, Merrick is able to sink his teeth in and satiate himself to an extent where he can at least heal, and also to mend himself and get into the right headspace, though he is feeling that whiskey quite a bit, and then starts to order Deacon to turn around and head back to the scene because they cannot leave the coterie there. Deacon parks near one of the entrances of the Shanghai tunnels, but the entrance that he parks near is not the same one that Tinia took. It's a different one that is in the basement of a building which specifically did Shanghai tunnel tours in Portland. The tours are shut down due to safety risk and maintenance due to the gas main explosions that have been going on lately, and where Axel, I'm gonna continue screwing that up. It's freaking Damien. Where Axel then shadow steps through the bars and starts heading to where his allies are at the far end. Merrick decides that he's going to take a different direct route, and this is where I, as a storyteller, made a call. They succeeded in their mission. They did exactly what they had planned to do. They got in and they saved Merrick, and I really didn't want to see the death of 2 players cause any problem here, because as a storyteller, I don't want them to bring in new characters at this point. There's no reason to, because if they do, like, there's going to be a whole new game dynamic. The players are going to have to get to know each other. They're going to have to explain everything that's going on to the new characters. It's just, it would be a massive cluster. And I did make a call. I do have a few ways of doing NPCs. I have NPCs that have 0 thought in them, and they are literally just numbers where it's just a difficulty. I have extremely thought out NPCs, which tend to be more of the antagonistic roles, the ones that are there to mess stuff up, and I want to have a set boundary on my storyteller capabilities of how I can mess up the players. I want them to be able to outthink me, not make up stuff on the spot and just mess with them for no reason. But I also have NPCs that are thought out in theory, who have a base level of traits that they can do things with, but I will tend to advance them if I think the story needs it. And at this point in time, I did decide that James Merrick, my Ventru Baron of the Sabbat, did need a little bit more than I had actually planned on him having. And I had him using Daunt to give him a menacing aura, walk through the crowd, letting them part so that he could get to the center of the incident, to the epicenter of where everything was going wrong, jump on a car, look at them all, and using mass manipulation, tell them all to go home. That was all that was needed to disperse the crowd. The police, the ambulance workers, everybody left. And when all the humans were cleared, I made one more judgment call, and that was to end this session right now, because at this point, the game had been going on for 7 hours, and I really, really needed to go to bed. I was exhausted, and I just wanted to end this night. So what I ended up doing was giving my my NPC, who had 136 years on these players, 2 advanced disciplines. One, mass manipulation, which he used to disperse the crowd, and the other one, earth shock potence, where he literally ripped another hole into the ground and was able to get the PCs out of there. Now, at that point, everybody piles out. The Camarilla really doesn't know what to do. I considered having them all attack, but considering the fact that they would be dealing with a lot of stuff that's going on up top, trying to figure out where Merrick was, what happened to the power, the attack that was going on in the basement, the Camarilla just did not have a chance to regroup and get everything on here. So they all pile into the car and drive off. and we ended the night with Merrick giving Deacon the directions on where to drive and leading them to the chapter house of the Cult of Mithras. And that is where we will be picking up the next night. And it was just an insane story. I love heists. We don't get to do heists very often. It's usually a straight out political maneuvering or a physical fight or something like that. And this was just such a long planned out. I did not do this story justice. I do want to let you guys know that. I'm just letting you know the gist of what happened. The players came up with such an amazing plan on how to get Merrick out of there, and they executed it very, very well to their capabilities. Unfortunately, they did not notice when they set off specific alarms and traps inside the tunnels, and they did alert guards. If they had been able to get through the tunnel without tripping anything, I wouldn't have had anybody in the basement except for maybe 2 Nosferatu to be like a quick little rumble fight thing, with one trying to escape to alert the others and the other one fighting straight on. But they did such a great job, and I, at one point in time, after we came up with the base plan, I actually excused myself from the table and said, okay, you guys do whatever extra planning that you want to do. That way, you know, you can spring stuff on me if need be. And just the stuff that they all came up with was so amazing. And I really can't wait to see what goes on next as they enter a whole new world. They have dealt with the Hecata. They have had dealings with the Cult of Mithras in the past, but they've never actually had to be this in-depth into them, where they actually need to seek sanctuary with the Cult of Mithras, and where they're going to be interacting with Alexander Thorne and Yolanda Porter and possibly others, because there are things that are going to happen. And I am incredibly excited to see where this story goes. Hopefully we'll be able to end Project Ragnarok relatively soon, giving my characters a chance to catch up to the date that we're actually in, because we're pretty far back in time. I'm pretty sure this is like, oh my god, I think this is like 8 sessions that we've been going night to night, and this is all taking place a month after the Sticks and Bones storyline. So I need to give my players some downtime. As for that, I am Voivode Maquette. This has been a look at my World of Darkness, and I look forward to hearing from you, to hear what you have to say about my about the plot line that I'm doing right now, because I'm just having fun. I hope you guys are enjoying it. Have a good evening. Good night.